Hey y'all, thanks for joining us here. We're just a few days or a few weeks or maybe a month away from planting wheat, depending on where you are. So we're going to talk what's going on in wheat. And this is kind of a pre-plant first edition. We do intend to kind of follow this wheat crop through the year and be able to make some comments. So you'll want to join us later. I'm Dennis Christie. I'm with Winfield United. I'm the agronomist. I cover Texas, Oklahoma, and
I'm Jonathan Folsom, seed agronomist, Winfield United, and I live in Texas.
So a little bit of a southern flair here. You'll see a little bit of an accent, maybe if you're not from here. But we want to go through some things and cover some thoughts and things that we want to talk about, some high points as we get started. So as we talk about pre-plant, things that we're thinking about pre-plant, Jonathan, what rolls off that you're thinking about first?
Yeah, so first of all, we got to get our timing right down. We got to get our planting date right, first of all. So we got to look at the calendar and throw a dart and figure out when we want to plant, right? Well, obviously not. So every region, every little local region has its own best planting date for optimum grain yield on hard red winter wheat. And I'm not going to pretend to tell you when that is. Where I live, it's October 15th. Where you live, it may be September 15th or November 15th. So talk to your local county agent, talk to your Winfield seed agronomist or sales guy, talk to somebody and figure out when's the best time for planting grain wheat in your area. But let's back up a step before that. What do we need to do to think about getting that ground ready before we can even plant?
So obviously, the considerations that we have now are things that we can't maybe conquer later on. And so those would be the ones that rise to the top. And one of those is wheat streak mosaic virus. Why wheat streak mosaic? Well, because there's nothing we can do about it later on. There's no fix. And so how do we fix it now? We call it the green bridge effect. We want to get rid of that green bridge, things that are growing in the field now, before we plant. So we want to start clean. The real key to that is volunteer wheat, other grassy weeds that wheat curl mite can harbor in. We want to get rid of that environment for them, and we do that by either chemically or through tillage, creating that environment where things aren't growing. And we want about 2 weeks. We'll take care of that situation.
So we want that field to be clean for 2 weeks, right? Not start thinking about it 2 weeks before we plant, but we need it to be dead and clean for 2 weeks for all those pests and diseases and pests to cycle out before we actually put our seed in.
Right. 2 weeks. 2 weeks covers everything that we need there. And so we're thinking about starting clean, and we have the opportunity to do that. And Jonathan, take us into a little bit of in season, what we're thinking about now. How do we take care of some of those big wheat problems?
Yeah, so you start clean, and there's no forgiveness. There's no going back and starting clean after you've already started. So starting clean is crucially important so that you can stay clean. And we've got some great tools these days, great technologies to stay clean through the growing season that my dad and my granddad didn't have when they were farming. Technologies such as even something that's older like Clearfield wheat. Is decent to help you stay clean. And, we're trying to battle some of these weeds you'll talk about in a minute that, a grassy weed in a grass crop like wheat is extremely difficult. And so if we can spray a grass herbicide, like we've got with the herbicide called Aggressor, which is using the coaxium technology in our cropland coaxium wheats, you can spray that on in season and actually kill the grass weed and keep the wheat alive and thriving. And so we've got 2 great varieties, and I'm not joking when I say great. That's not just an idle comment. The varieties are really stellar, fantastic varieties. Cropland 7050, which is the earliest of our coaxium varieties, and it'll work up in the Dakotas and anywhere where you need an earlier wheat variety. But then the 7017 has a bigger footprint. It's a medium maturity coaxium wheat, and it works from the Dakotas all the way down into central Texas, which was an outstanding surprise to us. We didn't think it would. We knew it was good over and adaptable really broadly, but we didn't quite realize that it had a great fit across that many different acres, that many soil types, soil pHs, and et cetera. So, Cropland's got some great wheat varieties, some conventional varieties like 7909 and 7010 and 7869. But I'm super excited, Dennis, about the 7050 and the 7017, because for so long, guys have just been stuck in a rut, using the same chemistry, the same herbicides over and over and over again, and now we've got a new tool to kind of help break that a little bit. But using that same technology over and over again has got us into some problems.
So, through the years, we've gone from, we need to deep plow, we need to plant more wheat to try to choke out some of these weeds. And I think we all see that coming around, that's not really one of the options that we have today as a best management tool. And so these things that you're talking about, the Clearfield, the coaxium wheat system, they give us opportunities to use that technology. But one of the things that we wanted to use with that is think about resistance management. So when we talk about the coaxium system, we can use aggressor herbicide 2 years out of 4 in wheat. So whether it's year 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 or 1 and 4, in between there, we need to use some different tools to help manage some of those really tough to control grassy weeds like feral rye, jointed goat grass, maybe it's wild oat, those issues that we have. And again, resistance management goes into the mode of action of the herbicide that we're talking about. So if you've used a group 1 herbicide in the past, coaxium might be a little bit weak for you on some wheat species that develop resistance, like Italian ryegrass. So really want to look at that, what we've done, manage the mode of action treatments, and then think about how do we use this technology the best. A coaxium aggressor application in the fall, we want to use with a non-ionic surfactant. It's a contact contact herbicide, so we've got to get really good coverage. So a non-ionic will help us do that, along with water volume, using the right nozzle and the right pressure. In the spring, we can move to a methylated seed oil type surfactant that will help us get better burn down on those weeds. And so using all the pieces of technology with rotation and modes of action will help us through that period. So there's a lot of things when we're talking about management, and Jonathan, what else about management would you think about in this wheat crop?
Yeah, there's a lot to cover, a lot to manage in a wheat crop. But so first thing that comes to mind is think about how do we manage our nitrogen? Our nitrogen, we've got the choice right now, Dennis. I mean, do we go ahead and throw all of our nitrogen out there pre-plant?
Hey, let's just throw it all out there.
Take the sweep rig, throw a bunch of anhydrous or whatever the case is, and get it done. Check that box, and we can move on, right? But that's going to give us, that's going to allow that nitrogen to volatilize. Something could happen to that nitrogen over the course of the winter or the spring. There's no telling.
Volatilization, leaching, or crop usage, right? Yeah. And run out before we get to the end.
Absolutely. So, Dennis, what's one of the biggest factors to drive protein in wheat? How do we get higher protein wheat?
Well, I think there's a lot of work being done on that. Variety does have a little bit to do with it. Population can have a little bit to do with it. Having some sulfur there can have something to do with it. But we're really trying to make sure that we have some nitrogen left after we've determined yield, and we want to have a little bit of nitrogen for protein. Protein doesn't happen without nitrogen. It just doesn't happen. So managing that, I think tissue tests can help us with that as we go through the season, but split nitrogen applications and those things will all help us with protein.
So we can work on our budget right now and say, you know what, let's not spend all of our money and waste some nitrogen in the fall. Let's save and the split apply, tissue sample, everything's going to happen based on a soil sample. So we're not suggesting that you go out and spend money that you don't need to. Let's get a soil sample done and determine all the other needs, but save some of that money for nitrogen for later, for in season. And then what are some other things What are some other things that we need to manage in that crop?
You know, the real take-home message out of management is we have to manage by variety. We just can't manage all the acres of wheat the same way. We don't do it with any other crop, and we can't do it with wheat today. There's too much data, there's too much knowledge, too much information. So we really want to go back and look at the characteristics of that variety. Does that variety, say, produce a lot of forage in the fall, or is it a tall variety? Is it shorter in stature? Does it tiller early in the fall, or maybe tiller in the spring? There's so many different things, characteristics, and one of those is disease and how it can resist. What's the native tolerance of those genetics to tolerate disease? But we know when we get heavy infestations of really yield-robbing information, yield-robbing disease, that the levels of native tolerance in the genetics might not control it. Things like leaf rust, stripe rust, or yellow rust, those types of things. But those don't happen every year. If they do, we treat for that with a fungicide. Those don't happen every year. It's what happens. What do we know about how a variety responds when there's not disease or there's very low disease pressure? And so there's information for fungicide trials where we can look at non-disease years or disease years and see how does a variety respond without that high level of disease. And that can really make us some money. And some varieties, year after year, that have the genetics to respond to a fungicide. Others don't respond to the fungicide as well, but they may have more native tolerance or less native tolerance. So it's really about managing that variety on the year.
So are you saying that I can adjust my budget and spend fungicide dollars differently based on the wheat variety that I'm planting?
Absolutely.
So if I know a variety is going to respond favorably to the fungicide, then I'm going to invest my fungicide dollars there, compared to a variety that's not going to show that same response to fungicide. And like you said, the data shows this. Even without disease, we can get a variety to yield a lot of bushels more with just adding a fungicide to it. And that's pretty amazing.
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic.
So managing that by variety. The other thing that we kind of get into a little bit is management, plant nutrition, fertility, that kind of thing. And I'll sum it up real quick. It's the 4 R's. It's the right time, the right source, the right rate, and the right placement. When one of those is wrong, the others might as well be wrong too, because we don't get the benefit out of the dollar that we're spending. And today, everybody wants to spend the right dollar. So have those discussions with your local agronomist to find the right time, the right rate, the right source, and the right placement based on the particular nutrient. Not every nutrient works like nitrogen. Some are immobile. If we put them on top, the roots don't get to pick them up. If we need that nutrient in the fall, then we need to put it on in the fall, not in the spring. So we've got to manage by variety, manage by nutrient. It's really taking into account the information that we have.
So we've got a lot of information and we've got a lot of decisions to make. There's timings of things, there's rates of things, and we haven't even talked about rates of the seeding rate yet. Let's get into that. So not every bushel of wheat has the same number of seeds in it. So how do you know how much wheat seed to plant per acre? Let's use an example of 1 million seeds per acre as your target seeding rate. But how do you know how to achieve that seeding rate if you don't know how many seeds are in a pound? Is that 50 pounds or is that 100 pounds? You can make an assumption that it's 15,000 seeds per pound, but you need to check that seed tag on your wheat and look. So every bag of cropland wheat seed has that seeds per pound listed on there. So you can look and see exactly how many seeds per pound you have. So when you're planting, you know how to achieve that target rate, and that helps you save money. So when you're switching varieties, you're not costing yourself by overplanting or underplanting compared to your target. And these days, I don't know about you, but budgets are getting tighter, dollars are harder to come by, and I just want to help guys spend money on the right thing. Spend it in the right place to get the right return.
The reality of today is that expectations with knowing what the expectations are and planning for those is real. Expecting something and not planning for it is too much of a wild guess, right?
Sure.
So really, if we can manage things by variety, manage our seeding rate by variety, and calibrate the drills by variety, by lot number, have an idea there, then it gives us a way to move forward. So we've talked to Jonathan about a lot of things here this afternoon. We've touched on it. We really want to come back and have some other installments of what's going on with wheat. One of the other things that we haven't talked about is seed treatments. And seed treatments really can do two things. One is a fungicide. That fungicide can control things that might be on the seed or disease that might attack the wheat early on, and we want to get it off to a good start. We know having good roots is a foundation to that. Or they can have insecticide properties as well. One of the things with insecticides is aphids. Really want to control bird cherry oat aphids. Not have barley yellow dwarf creep in. We might be able to do that early on, depending on the rate of insecticide that's used, how long it lasts. But that insecticide does a couple other things as well. Might pick up wireworms or grubs. May have some activity on grasshoppers, depending on rate. We know grasshoppers can come in from the field borders and chew off the top, and you know, maybe we can withstand that, but we want off to a quick, good, early start. So the seed treatments can help provide some activity there, but they don't do anything for armyworm. And we're having armyworms in about every crop that we've got around here now. So we have a suspicion that armyworms will be a problem as we plant fall wheat. So that's going to require monitoring, watching out for what's going on, watching the birds, that kind of thing if you see them in fields. So seed treatment's going to be a real big help, gets us off to a really good start, protect us against some things later on, as well as now early on. Hessian fly is another. So as we go through this, want to think strongly about seed treatments because they give us an opportunity to address it now of a problem that we cannot address later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you brought up Hessian fly, and that circles us. We make full circle back to planting date now. So if you're far enough south, the planting date is not a big deal. You can't change the planting date and get away from the Hessian fly, but you can in certain parts of the country. You can delay your planting date and get past the point where that Hessian fly is going to be a problem. So that's called the fly-free date. You're probably familiar with that if you've battled Hessian fly. But seed treatment, yeah, it's a very important piece of that. What happens if you plant too early, Dennis? Too early. We could use too much moisture in the fall and run out of moisture, so we could lose yield there. We could lose yield to the Hessian fly by planting too early. But we have to plant early to give all those worms something to eat, don't we?
Give it up to the worms, right?
Right, yeah.
No, we don't want to do that. We don't want to give it up to the worms. But we do want to make sure that we talk about management all the way through the season. So thinking about the problems we have. So I'm going to summarize kind of what we've talked about here just real quick. Okay. We talked about planting dates and trying to fine tune that, maybe even by variety. What kind of coleoptile length does it have? When might we want to plant that? We've talked about eliminating the green bridge so that we don't have problems with wheat streak mosaic virus. We've talked about some of the herbicide systems, and we can get into more depth of that later on. We talked a little bit about the resistance. We've talked about management by variety, and I think that's one of the big key things we want to push here. Management by variety. A little bit about nutrition with that, seeding rate, and seed treatments. So we've kind of covered a full base here. There's a whole lot more to get into in this ball game. And so we'll move to inning number 2 in a month or 2 and see how this has stopped or started for us. And so with that, I personally want to say thank you for joining us here with this, and have a great growing season.